motivation, and work. So try to say this guy's name. Just try to in your head for a second, see if you can get it. His name is Chick Sent Me High. Chick Sent Me High. So he's important because he observed that people's quality of life increases when they are engaged at work. All right, so there's been a lot of studies done, and you want to try to go into something that engages you, and then obviously that you like. If you're not engaged at work, um, obviously it'll affect your work, but it also affects your personal life as well. So you want to make sure that you're engaged at work. And so he called this flow, right? So flow is when an individual is so focused without awareness of self and time. So have you ever been like just caught up in something and you kind of like lost track of time? Maybe you're reading a good book or something like that. I know if you played sports, a lot of times you can kind of get in the flow of the game and kind of like kind of ignore the crowd that is there. There's been some movies that kind of like emphasize this. So that is flow. So and obviously he focused on like the workplace, and when you get in that flow, like at work. So types of psychology: industrial organizational psychology, IO psychology. This is the application of psychological concepts and methods to optimizing human behavior in the workplace. So a lot of times when people think about psychology and jobs, they only think about therapists. There's a lot of other types of psychology jobs out there, and this is one of them. It's a very popular one. It's one that usually you just need a master's for, and so for a lot of people, like if you want to open up like your own practice, a lot of times you need a doctorate for that, even if it's just a SIAD and not like a medical degree like a psychiatrist. This one you only need a master's for, and they start off with pretty good pay. So this is kind of broken down into personnel psychology and organizational psychology. Personnel psychology is a subfield that focuses on employee recruitment, selection, placement, training, appraisal, and development. Organizational psychology is a subfield that examines the influence on worker satisfaction and productivity. So an IO psychologist, they focus on like the workplace. So some might focus on like who's the best people to hire for that job. Um, a lot of times they go in and they look at what's the best environment for that job. You want the best morale and things like that. So if you look at some more modern companies like a Google or something like that, like they look at this and they analyze this and they have like break rooms, they have like nap rooms. Their food they serve is like phenomenal, and I think you can get like as much as you want. So they've analyzed it and they found out like that's the best environment to get the most productivity out of your workers. So I always remember, so back in the early 2000s, the country was going through a recession, and a lot of companies were like losing money. And so what they did, a lot of them hired these type of people, and they would go in and they would analyze like the company, and they would say, hey, you should get rid of these people, you should promote these people, you should change this environment to it, which was kind of shown in the movie Office Space, where you had Bob and Bob came in, and that's what they did with it. And so some people were happy because they got promotions a lot, and some people weren't happy because they either got fired or they got demoted and then probably ended up leaving. So how do you get a job? Uh, the main way is actually knowing someone. A high percentage of jobs you have is because you know someone. First step to getting a job, though, besides knowing someone, is a resume. You need to have a good resume. So typically, beginning of the year, I usually have students, create a psychology resume to get a job they saw posted online, right? So it's kind of fictional. So it's for you to see what would you need to have, like what are the skills they're looking for, education, things like that, to get a job in the field of psychology. And a lot of what students tend to turn in, I'm like, I wouldn't even look at this because it's sloppy and things like that. So you want to make sure you have a nice, clean, crisp resume. You don't want to have errors on it. You don't want to have spaces not filled in, and it should actually be pretty short. I know, like it was a long time ago now, but like when I was applying for my first teaching jobs, they said my resume should be no longer than one page. I should be able to get everything on the one page. Then let's say they like your resume, they call you in for an interview. So an interview is really just the first impression, right? Uh, Sometimes it's called the interviewer illusion because it's just first impression. A lot of times, some people are good at interviews, some people aren't. I particularly do not like interviews. I'm not the best at interviews. I think I'm a great employee and I'll do the job well, but I'm not a great interviewer. Where some people they're great at putting on a show, but then they're awful at the actual job. But that's really what the interview is. And so you could have different interviews. You could have a structured interview, or you could have unstructured interviews. So sometimes you might be sitting down with sometimes it's a big group of people that you interview with. They're all looking at you. You have a set number of questions you need to answer. Sometimes it's very informal, and you're just walking around and kind of having a conversation with them. So hooray, you have a job. But so how do you keep it? Um, Employers, they go through an appraisal process on, are you doing uh, the job you're supposed to be doing? So usually there's like a checklist of behaviors, a whole graphic rating scale. There's a behavioral rating scale, and then usually you get like a 360-degree feedback. That means you get feedback from everyone. So you have a supervisor rating, you have a customer rating, you have a peer rating, you have a subordinate rating, and a self rating. Self-rating, I always hate those, because obviously you want to be honest, you want to give yourself a good rating, but what's too good, so that one I always hate. Supervisor rating, obviously your boss rates you. So me as a teacher, I have administrators that come in and watch me teach. You have a customer rating, so that'd be kind of like you guys rating your teachers. But if you think about a lot of times like at maybe restaurants or different stores, they have like a customer feedback box you could drop ratings in. And now most of our shopping is done online, so I'm always getting surveys about rating my shopping experience. So that'd be a customer rating. You have peer ratings, so the peers can rate each other, and then you have subordinate ratings. So this is where you rate the boss. So a lot of times people think being the boss, you can just tell people what to do. That's not being, I guess that's being a boss, but not a leader. And so a leader isn't just about bossing people around. It's getting them to be um, their best self, right? Their most productive. And that's not just yelling at them. So a lot of times a boss can be fired if their subordinates don't like them, if they're not treating them well. So motivating achievement, right? You want to climb that ladder of success. So a lot of times the desire for significant accomplishment, mastering skills. That's usually our motivating, our why we want to accomplish things is to master something depending on what your job is. Sometimes it's skill based. Sometimes you want rewards and things like that. Satisfaction in your job is obviously important. You want to feel satisfied in your job. The more satisfied you feel, the harder you're going to work and the better you're going to do. You want to be engaged, just like we talked about with Chick Set Me High. You want to be engaged at work. If not, you're not, going to be as successful, as productive. And then lastly, empowerment. You want to feel like you have a choice in what's going on. So even as a teacher, you know, I work hard, develop lessons, but I feel like I kind of have a choice in how I teach it. So there's certain things I have to teach, but I have, I'm empowered to kind of teach how I want. Where some places, some schools, they tell the teachers exactly what they're teaching every single day. And that's nice in one aspect, but another aspect, I don't take any ownership over that, so I might not work as hard as I do now. So management. So management, a couple things they need to do is identifying strengths, right? They need to see the strengths and weaknesses of the people underneath them, and you need to go towards those people's strengths. So I think about like sports, like a coach. A lot of times there's good and bad coaches, obviously. Well, a lot of good coaches, they don't just do the same thing every year. They will adapt their strategy based off the strengths and weaknesses of their players. And so that's what a good manager does. They need to set goals. All right, so I know people in management positions, and that's what they talk about a lot. It's all about goal setting. And so that I'm a big goal um, oriented person, which is not just like big goals, but small goals as well. So make sure you know the different types of leadership. So there's four leaderships that we're going to talk about here. Make sure you know the four. We have task leadership. These are like goal-oriented people. We have social leadership. These are like mediators, team builders. It's all about like coming together as a team. So these would be people who want to do a lot of like team building exercises. I'm not sure if anyone's ever been to one of those places where you have to do team building exercises. I think there's one near us called Iron Oaks. There was one I did like in high school where you have to like work together to like accomplish all these obstacles. So social leaders, those are those mediators, those team builders. And then we have theory X and theory Y. So this is one that's popular. Like I remember seeing this like in master's classes I took a long time ago. So this is one you see a lot. So theory X leaders, they think workers are lazy and need direction. All right, so therefore you need to be strict with them. Where theory Y leaders, they think workers need freedom and are intrinsically motivated. So if you just leave them alone, right, and give them some freedom, they're going to be most productive that way. In reality, you just need to kind of see your employees. Sometimes you need to be that theory X person. Sometimes you need to be that theory Y person. It all depends on the employee. I mean, I've had a lot of students talk about their jobs and how, I remember one year, like I think she was supposed to like help people. I don't know if she worked at like Macy's or like a JCPenney type thing. She was supposed to be helping people, and she just said how she would hide. So obviously she needed someone over her to make sure she was doing her job because she wasn't doing a good job. Where some people, if you kind of give them direction and then give them freedom, they'll be intrinsically motivated to do a good job, and you don't need to be over them all the time. So that's kind of up to the leader in recognizing what type of leader they need to be. And lastly, different types of conflict. All right, so there's 3 different types of conflict you need to know. The first one is the approach conflict. This is where you have 2 desirable things are wanted, but only one option can be chosen. So example, you have a desirable date or you have a ski trip with friends. I want this, but I also want that. All right, this is where you want to do 2 things, but you can't. You have to choose one, but both are good. All right, so that's approach conflict. Avoidance conflict. There's 2 unattractive alternatives. Right? So the example would be, do I study or do I do the dishes? I don't want this and I don't want that. Right? You don't want to do either thing, but you got to choose one. So you usually choose the lesser of 2 evils. And then you have approach avoidance conflict. There's attractive and unattractive parts to both sides. I want this, but I don't want what this entails. So a lot of students say, I want good grades, but I don't want to study or do my homework, right? So for me, it's like, I want to eat this ice cream every night, but I don't want to get fat, right? So there's attractive and unattractive parts to it, right? It tastes good, but it's unhealthy type of thing.